Hello and welcome to the DMPL Podcast. I'm Aaron Gurnis, your host, and today on the podcast we're joined by the first author in this year's Fall Author Series, Shawntelle Madison. Shawntelle, how are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Shawntelle is the author of The Fallen Fruit, a book coming out next week. We're recording this. It's going to be released on August 28th, this podcast, which is 6 days before The Fallen Fruit comes out. Shawntelle has also written the Coveted series, which, how many books were in the Coveted series? Three or four?
Yeah, three books and then kind of like a second season with the Flea Market Magic series. So
Nice, nice. So
readers kept poking me.
they have spoken you. And this is a little bit of a change of pace from the Coveted series. Can you explain, I think Coveted, how would you describe Coveted? And then how would you describe The Fallen Fruit, this new novel that you've written?
They're definitely very different books, very different tone. The Coveted series, I would say it is more urban fantasy. The tone is much more humorous. Obviously, there's moments that are quieter moments since my heroine is a werewolf with OCD. So, yeah, there's definitely laughs and all sorts of things there, but it does get moments where it's serious. So, more urban fantasy, heavier speculative fiction. But The Fallen Fruit, I would definitely say, is my jump more toward leaning a bit more commercial, more literary. The Fallen Fruit is definitely where I go much more deeper in terms of the storytelling and such like that. So yeah.
I think my description of The Fallen Fruit, and I mean, this is just one layperson's layman's pitch, but like kind of like a half generational epic, half time travel story that intertwines with each other. And it was so well written and so well done. I just really appreciate it. I finished it yesterday. Appreciated that the work you put into it. Can you talk a little bit about the story of The Fallen Fruit? Because I know in your author's note, we can kind of lay the groundwork here. We're not going to get into too many spoilers, but let's lay the groundwork here for the Bridge family and this farm in Virginia and what this was born out of.
Yes, a really great question. So I actually do genealogy. I've been doing genealogy. If you saw the dedication in the book, thanks to my Uncle Toby, who he was a man out of Iowa Falls, Iowa. I really got a passion into exploring my family's genealogy within Iowa. And then, of course, that search kind of expanded to Virginia. And while hunting around, I discovered my sixth great grandmother, Amy Bowles Farrow, who was a free Black woman who owned hundreds of acres in Charlottesville, Virginia. And so once I kind of discovered her story, her background, I couldn't help but, ask myself those what if questions. What if that family who, is trying to survive in such a place surrounded by plantations and trying to make a living, what happened if they were cursed with time travel? And so
Life
that
was
was
probably
kind
tough enough, right?
exactly, exactly. And oh my goodness, the research that I had to do into living during the American Revolutionary period, the late teens, 1700s, it was definitely hard for anyone other than folks who are farmers. So yeah.
So you're doing research into your family genealogy. These gems, this gem of a story comes together. I got asked, was the time travel element always part of it, or were you just kind of playing around with characters and settings and just trying to figure out something? And then this idea that one person each generation basically falls back through time and has to, suffer through some of the challenges of the past. Was that something that came out after you kind of played around with some things?
Yeah, initially when I had the idea, I was considering kind of like doing an approach as far as kind of like biographical, where I explore Amy Bowles Farrow and then her children, especially the fact that one of her children was married to Critta Hemings, who was Sally Hemings' sister. So there was definitely a rich history there.
Sally Hemings of the Jefferson plantation,
Yes,
correct? Yes,
yes,
yes.
Monticello.
Yep.
And so I was like, there's such a rich history there. But of course, I'm speculative fiction. And so whenever I have an idea, of course, the speculative kind of jumped in really fast when I remember that day very vividly where I was like, "Ooh, what could I do with Amy's family?" But then suddenly, whoa, time travel jumped in. And then at that point, I just followed the White Rabbit down Alice's in Wonderland, all that type of stuff. So I had some fun with it.
Now, time travel books are always, you know, there's challenges involved in them, and I think you pretty much set the rules uh, pretty straightforward. And there wasn't too much explanation, I guess, of like the how this works necessarily or something like that, which I appreciate. I thought was well done, but also was it tempting to try to get into more details? Did you have rules that you sketched out that you never laid out to the readers? Because I know sometimes it's easier to almost put that all out there in your own head so you can just kind of know exactly how you got to do this, even if you don't want to dig into the weeds for readers' sake to tell the story.
I tried from the get-go because usually with my background, I'm a developer and I like things very black and white
Sure, yeah.
and concrete. And so, in particular, in this story, from the get-go, I said to myself that I am not going to explain everything. I definitely wanted things to be up to the reader to allow their imagination for them to attempt to find my little breadcrumbs if I kind of led people toward a particular idea, but I don't fully explain on purpose how the time travel came about, how whether it could be stopped or not. It was more this force that people had to contend with for the rest of their lives, which is just as frightening as if you had actually learned how it came about. So that's how I
Yeah.
was.
And I think so. You explored with different characters, different parts of this bridge family, and I thought it was interesting because I think it allowed you to kind of tap into almost different genres in a sense. Like Reva's story, I really thought had like more of a horror element to it, and there's different love stories in there as well, and there's different just kind of like the struggles of family and the struggles of living in that historical fiction time. So was that part of this process too? Was it something that you knew that you wanted to play around with different styles of writing as part of these different segments of the book?
I absolutely I'm glad you point out horror because actually I'm a huge horror fan. Like Clive Barker, I'm a huge Clive Barker fan, all that sorts. And so when I was actually writing the story, I definitely wanted to set a particular tone in terms of the fact that the time travel was this unseen force, this unseen thing that could take your child away. Now, obviously, the relationships between Reba, her neighbors, her husband, her children were a driving force in terms of how the story unfolded, but there was definitely an element of tension that I wanted to carry throughout the story. And that tension at times definitely did unfold like horror, like a thriller, even in the other parts where I definitely was attempting to set a tone as the story unfolded.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a spoiler to tell people that the way this time travel works is like sometime each uh, a member, if each time a bridge man has children, one of their children will fall through time, typically before the age of 26. And when we say fall through time, they just kind of poof, straight up disappear from their timeline and reappear in the same, about the same physical spot, give or take, sometime in the past. Could be 20 years, could be 60 years, could be 150 years. But and so for the family members that see it happen, it does look like magic. And that's kind of part of the plot. It looks like magic, or it looks like a horror show. They just poof disappear right in front of their eyes, and it is terrifying to think about. It's kind of, it reminded me of the classic The Snapped of the Avengers, or
Yes.
the Leftovers on HBO, that kind of thing, where you just it that sense of just disappearance just so crazy, and it's like it's almost hard to, it's such an easy thing to visualize that it's hard to get out of your mind.
That for me was pivotal in terms of for anyone who's interpreting it, depending on the time period, it's all about perspective. So perhaps in the American Revolution period, folks would think it's witchcraft.
Hmm.
Or for someone from Cicely's perspective in the 1960s, she's seen The Time Machine, she's seen various other movies. And so she's like, oh, what is the science behind this? How is this actually happening? Can I prevent this? So, yeah, definitely it's all perspective and how people witness the event happening, but also how does their relationships with the people who disappeared, how does that affect them too? And so that was pivotal for me, is to tap into family or friends and how that affects them.
So writing more or less writing this genre of book for the first time, or at least writing to be published for the first time with this kind of book after doing the Coveted series, after being into the more humorous urban fantasy scene, what were some of the bigger challenges you had, and like how long was this book percolating in your mind? I guess, was it something you were thinking about as you were writing some of those coveted books?
Actually, this book was just one of those books that kind of came out of nowhere, where I told you, like one day I was exploring my genealogy, and then just bam, within it. It's that is one of the beautiful things about what if questions, is they come to you quickly. And then once you kind of have that inkling of an idea, it's like that baton that you get passed in the 4x100 or the Olympics, where you just run for it. Now, in terms of challenges for the book, wow, wow, wow. I have, like I said, I have a technology background. And so I am used to digging deep in terms of exploring whether it's programming languages or how complex systems of different devices and middleware work. I kind of jumped into it that way, where I had to be absolutely methodical in terms of my research. Um, the temptation to actually, as I'm writing scenes, to do research on every single little thing would have prevented me from making any progress. So a lot of the time it was, okay, I want to set the scene here. I have the characters driving the story. These are the aspects that I need to do deeper research on, so that I save my time, and I continue the forward motion of finishing the book. I will say, though, that the research more toward the present can be more time consuming because there's more materials available,
Mm.
versus the earlier parts, where maybe if I'm in the 1750s, okay, now I need to find maps. Now I need to find information about settlements and their population, and the different types of houses, what they're made of, what the inside looks like. It became one of those things where I had to use technology and tools to actually organize my research. And I have to tell you, the developers of Aeon Timeline, it's software that you use to actually create timelines, track dates, track people within the timelines, was absolutely pivotal to keep ages straight
I bet,
between
yeah.
when somebody's in one time period and then they jump into the past. Obviously, their age stays the same, but where they sit in a different timeline has changed. So it was definitely about meticulously keeping track of everything.
I want to talk about your background a little bit. I think it's obviously I think coming from a programming development standpoint to be a published author is pretty unique, and I think people sometimes will underrate the amount of creative thinking that goes into kind of programming and development in that sense. I mean, there's a lot of, you're not just plugging in numbers and code, you have to think about a lot of it, but it still is a much more I think like literally logical brain space than your average literary writer. you know, so when you what strengths do you think that helps bring you when you write, and what challenges do you think that maybe that kind of like frame of reference provides as you're trying to put stories from on pen to paper?
The beautiful thing about writing versus developing, for me, though, is that actually that creative well is the same place. So if I do programming all day, it's actually harder for me to do writing, because in this case, I have to take code that might be broken, or I have to take a concept or an idea and actually translate it to code. That is still, for me, tapping into the same creative well. Now, in terms of what programming has given me, being a developer is actually, some of my background in project management and other things has taught me to, okay, 8 a.m., you sit down and you work. And okay, there's something wrong with this scene. Let's think about this methodically, logically. Let's break this down. What is missing? I also, when I edit, I tend to be surgical, meaning almost looking at lines of code. Okay, this line is broken. How do I optimize this line? It turns into the same way translating with writing for me, where my mind will take a look at a scene sentence by sentence, and I'll say, oh, this verb is weak. Oh, this is this. And then I will optimize doing it that way. But that's just me and how my
Yeah.
mind works.
That's interesting. I didn't even think about the editing process, but obviously when you're looking at code, you're trying to like really there you don't know where something might be broken, so you have to look so carefully at some of the stuff in there. And um yeah, that's interesting. I didn't even think about that, but that's such a fascinating like way of editing then too. Probably versus like the general big picture stuff that some people have.
Yes, I will admit that big picture is actually one of my weak points. I tend to really love focusing on those trees within the forest,
Yeah.
and then it kind of takes a little mindset switch to actually zoom out and do look at that big picture and how everything is structured. And I won't lie, I definitely do depend on my critique partners and
Yeah.
my editors at HarperCollins to make sure that I'm on point.
Well, it must be fun. I mean, I don't know. It must be fun for the editors. I'm sure editors that read books every day can kind of tell the difference in someone that's coming at it from different kinds of background like this.
Yeah, I definitely agree. When I have critiqued my peers, I can definitely see though that perspective, definitely.
Well, tell us a little bit about your Iowa background. I know you are living in St. Louis now, but you have background here in Des Moines, background in Iowa. Tell us a little bit about what you where you're what it is.
Yes, yes. So I was born in Des Moines, but I have in the past lived in various other cities. I lived in, oh my goodness, Perry, Iowa, and I went to Iowa State in Ames. So I'm a Cyclone. And so over the years, I've definitely still consider Iowa home, still go back to visit family. I've really dug deep in terms of exploring my Iowa history. And I love the fact that on both sides of my family, I have a rich history of coal miners who had migrated over from Virginia, but also Louisiana and the South. But my family does have a deep history of working as coal miners.
Interesting. Any particular place in Iowa then, or just in the South in general, were they coal miners or?
They were in all of these towns, of course, are gone. It's
Oh
sad.
yeah, yeah.
Zuxper and then also Buxton on both
Buxton. Yep.
sides. Yes, Buxton on both sides. My mother and my father in
Wow.
Buxton.
Where's Vicksburg at?
That one is it's close to Des Moines, but I believe it's either to the north or the south. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. I'd have to, of course, look that up since it's my grandmother's side of the
Yeah.
family. But that's where she was born. So that's a
Interesting.
town that no longer exists.
Did you ever come to the library when you lived in Des Moines?
Yes, yes. I have fond memories of when the old Central Library location was at its old location where you
Mm-hmm.
had that very old building.
That's
And
the World
uh,
Food Prize now. Yep.
yes, I have very fond memories of going in there and just being in awe of like, wow, the when you from a child's perspective, it's like all the books in the world are here. Now, of course, as an adult, I know that's different, but I have very fond memory of visiting the various branches in Des Moines and being in awe that I can read these books and I can get, whatever I want. So, yeah, very fond memories of the Des Moines Public Library.
Have libraries in general helped with your genealogy hunts? I'm just curious.
Oh my gosh, yes, yes, and yes. That is one of the things that I kind of had to learn after I reached the point to where I did all sorts of digging online, is I realized at the next point I would actually have to go to genealogy centers, and libraries are so helpful. All you have to do is pretty much search online with your local county or city library, and a lot of times they will have a genealogy center where you can access some of the paid sites such as Ancestry, Fold3. You can get these services for free. Also, Family Search through the Latter-day Saints. You can get a lot more materials materials when you're actually at your library's location through using their network. So libraries, you guys are the superheroes. Thank you for making my research a lot easier, because otherwise those stopping points, they really are difficult to go through.
That's what we like to hear. Thanks for pumping us up a little bit. So I got to ask, what are you going to be doing on tour here? I know you're coming to Des Moines. We talked a little bit beforehand, but what's the plan for this book release as you get out on the road? Are we stop number 1, 2, 3? Where are we on that list after the book gets released?
Des Moines is stop number 3. So
Nice.
the tour itself, pretty much the September stops are going to start off in St. Louis on the evening of September the 3rd. And that's going to be happening at really fun Third Wheel Brewery. And so going to give folks a chance who buy a ticket to get a drink of apple cider, just like the Bridges.
Ah,
And
nice.
then,
Yes.
yes, and then the next day, I'm going to be heading into Iowa, and I'm going to be starting off in Marion, Iowa at the Marion Public Library, also partnering with Swamp Fox Books. And then, of course, the next day, that's Des Moines
Woo.
at Central Public Library. Really excited about that one because I've got all sorts of family members stopping in, and really excited about that. And then on Saturday, I'm headed off to Printers Row in Chicago. Then on the 16th, I will be at Majors and Quinn in Minneapolis. And then a couple days later, on the 18th, I will be back in St. Louis in the Clayton area toward downtown. Well, I will be partnering with Left Bank Books to have an event there. So I'm
Yeah.
really excited about the September stuff, and lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, that's a busy schedule you got lined up for yourself. That should be a lot of fun. I assume you must like seeing readers out and about and like hearing what they have to say.
I think pretty much any chance where I can um, chat with readers, it's always fun, because I'm one of those people where even if we talk about my book, I want to know what they're reading. I
Hmm.
want to know, what's popular in your world. What are you excited about? Um, because I'm a reader too still. And so I want to fall into a book. I want to abandon my family and actually read a book late at night. And so the best way is you can get recommendations online, but I love the excited recommendation from someone else. So I think that's another reason why I love to connect with readers.
So, on that topic, what's on your book on your bedside table right now, or what are you going to be taking with you when you hit the road next week?
Oh my goodness, my TBR list is ridiculously long because last year I had finished my MFA. And
Oh,
so I was doing all that reading. And so I have queued up at least 4 years worth of books. I'm so ashamed. But I would say if you looked at my bedside right now, um, The Next Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine, I loved the first book. It's a thriller, but I'm reading that book, and then also a book that I wanted to read a couple years ago by Caitlin Starling, and that's the Luminous Files, or Luminous Dark. Apologies, I can't remember the title, but it's definitely, one is a thriller, one is science fiction, and so for me, it's about the story. I want to fall into a good story.
all right. We'll have those on the show notes, by the way. So if you're listening in the car, you don't have to pull over. We'll put that on the links in the show notes for everyone so they can check out those books. I want to, as we get closer to the end here, wrap up to get back to the book. You had four main characters, or probably like six-ish, I guess, main characters, but four kind of main stories that you told as part of this Bridge family generation. Amelia, Cicely, Luke, and Bree had their own story, and Reba as well in her family. What was your favorite to write?
Oh man, that's like asking a mom which kid is their
Okay,
favorite.
maybe what
But
was
I do have
the
an answer though. I
okay,
actually
okay,
do have an
yeah,
answer. Um, it was, I'm not gonna lie, I loved Sabrina and Luke's story.
yeah,
And that was actually the one I had started first. The first lines, even though Amelia's part is first, and then of course Cicely, her frame narration jumps in. But in terms of the American Revolution, that was my favorite time period to write.
interesting.
Yes.
Is it? What was this one of those books where you just kind of wrote the pieces and then tried to figure out the how the narrative or the frame of reference for the narrative structure kind of fit together, or did you know that you wanted to write Amelia's first and have Cicely's kind of laid out, but you just had happened to have a better handle on Luke and Bree right away?
Pretty much when I saw originally when I first started my first draft, I actually told the story chronologically. So
Interesting.
it did open up with Cicely's part
Yeah,
where the story unfolds, but actually the part one was originally Sabrina. But then as I was working with my agent, working with my editor, we started to bring the story together, and um, Amelia's part actually did a much better job of actually introducing the reader to the world. The
sure.
group, they already knew about the time travel, they already knew about the rules. And so it was a way to introduce the reader to the Bridges world, where if you start with Sabrina's part, you're more in the dark before Luke falls and the story unfolds as far as how the curse works.
It kind of that
So,
makes it almost more of like a mystery instead of like the generational story that it became, which is just interesting how you can just plug pieces here and there, and it just kind of changes the tone of what a book is.
yes, yes, exactly.
Nice. Well, is there what are you going to be talking about when you come to Des Moines on the 5th of September?
I am really excited to talk with readers about how, I mean, I'm pretty much open to so many topics, but any opportunity for me to, of course, gab about genealogy in the space of working within Iowa, how we can actually take stories from our past, from our ancestors, and apply them to the past or the future, or show a reflection of what's going on in society today, talk about my writing process, and all sorts of other fun goodies. So I have so much in my pocket, and I can't wait for to gabbo out how this story unfolded.
Awesome. Well, again, Shawntelle will be here on September 5th at the Central Library. The Fallen Fruit right here, September 3rd, it comes out. That's Tuesday. I know we already have a hold list on the library. A lot of people have it on hold. It's going to be for sale, of course, at all local bookstores as well. So be sure to grab a copy if you want one right away. And we'll be having them for sale as well at the event on the 5th, too. So plenty of opportunities to grab the book. I know Shawntelle, she wrote a fantastic book here, and you definitely don't want to miss it. So we look forward to seeing you on Thursday, September 5th. Shawntelle, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Awesome.